Hey Sabrina, hey Avra.
Hi.
So I just brought you guys here to interview you guys about triggers because I'm actually doing a project in one of my classes where we basically explored different ideas and we had to make a mind map. And so my mind map was on mental health, and I felt that, triggers are a really big thing that we don't really talk about and that we tend to avoid. So I guess my first question for you guys would be, what does it mean to you to be triggered?
I think to be triggered, I think it's just really anything. It could be anything from like sights to smells to even places or certain people can even trigger you. And basically these things set off a reaction that can push you back into a time where you were experiencing trauma. So you might remember things from traumas. You might kind of have some of the same feelings. You don't necessarily, I feel like sometimes you don't even necessarily have to be taken back to that moment. It can just be a feeling that you had during this time.
Right. Avra, what is being triggered to you?
I would definitely agree with Sabrina. I would also say maybe some songs might trigger me. Like when you listen to a song, it might bring you back to the first time you heard it or where you were at when it was playing. It could be bad emotions.
Right. So, have you guys ever experienced a trigger before?
Yeah, I think for me, one of my big triggers is like tones of voices. So in my head, I register a tone change as yelling. So my mom always gets on to me about this. She's always telling me, like, Sabrina, I'm not yelling. My tone of voice just changed. But I've had so much trauma around yelling that any kind of tone change to me just immediately registers it as yelling. And typically, growing up in the house with the family, I'm no longer with them, that I grew up with, anytime there was yelling or high tones, violence immediately followed. So my first instinct would be to like run and hide. So now, as a 23-year-old adult, like if I'm walking down the street and say there's a big group of people and just the voices are really loud, my first instinct is to get out of there and go and hide. And it doesn't even register, that the loud voices might be like they're excited, they're happy about something. It's just the tone of voice, really just the loud noises.
Right. And I'm sure that sounds like a really difficult trigger, and it most likely, comes from a very, very, very horrendous time. But what did it feel like when you experienced that?
I typically get a little bit like panicky, I guess. I just try to remove myself from the situation, whether it's a good or a bad situation. It's just uncomfortable. I panic. I get a little anxious. I get nervous. So typically, I'll just leave the room or cross the street or something, or just remove myself from anything that's going to make me feel that way.
Right, and probably using different coping mechanisms and whatnot. Yeah. So, Avra, have you ever experienced a trigger?
Yeah, I would say smells are probably what triggers me the most. Specifically, maybe perfumes. Like I'll smell a perfume and it'll bring me back to a time that I was with a toxic friend.
Right. And how did that make you feel? Like, how does that make you feel whenever you're experiencing that?
I would honestly say like a lot of emotions, because I just kind of think back on the memories of when I was with that person. Right. And it could be good memories, it could be bad, mainly bad, right?
Right. And I guess like the hardest part about triggers is like you don't want to relive those emotions, and then like you're being completely submerged back into that time and the feeling that you felt, and it's just such an unsteady feeling. But whenever you guys are triggered, do you guys think about anything in particular? Or is it random?
For me, I don't think it's any particular like moment in time that I remember, or any particular like memory, or it's just kind of a feeling. So for me, cause like some people get triggered and then they're brought back to a specific memory. For me, I never really get those specific traumas pop up. I just get a feeling. So I just get like, I know that this general thing, like, so for me it's like I know that violence generally follows these loud tones. So loud tones, it's just the feeling of like something bad's gonna happen. So for me, it's just a feeling. It's not really a moment in time that I remember.
Right. So does that feeling spark more negative feelings and more events that you've been through? Or does it just kind of resonate with that one event that you're thinking about?
No, so I don't think of any one event. I don't think of any events at all. It's just the feelings. It's just like, it's a childhood as a whole. There's no one specific thing. It's just, this is how I felt as a child. I felt scared. So I would, my sister would always, anytime anything happened, my sister would tell me, go and hide. So she kind of conditioned me to do that. And even now as an adult, like 23 years old, Thanksgiving dinner, people are arguing. I'm like, okay, like, I'm gonna head out now. So.
Yeah, I totally get that. That flight response is really common. And Avra, is your situation the same whenever you're triggered, or do you think about other things?
I might say I'd be opposite, like back onto the smell thing. I'd maybe like smell the perfume, and then I would think about like the memories I had with the person, and
Right.
it almost makes me feel like I'm stuck in the past and like I can't move forward necessarily.
Right.
And it almost like brings me back to the person I was even, and you kind of like get in that mindset again, and you just have to bring yourself out and say like, hey, like you're past that, like that person's gone.
Right. So what is it like to try to bring yourself out of it? Is that a complicated thing, or does it take a while?
I would say it's all just like a mind game. So you just got to keep yourself busy and remove
Right.
yourself from the situation. Probably stop buying that perfume.
So yeah, and I totally get that. And again, thanks guys for being so raw and real about everything. I know that it's super difficult to do that. And, if it's not too personal, I was wondering if you guys could each give me an example of a trigger that you've been through and how it impacted you at that time.
So, for example, let's see. Right, so I was removed from the family that I was with when I was younger, and I was adopted later on in life when I was a teenager. And so now I have two younger siblings. They're like 4 and 5, and I'm 20, or they're 5 and, how old are they? They're like 4 and 6 years old, and I'm 23, so it's a huge age difference. Well, occasionally, if I'm over at my parents' house for dinner, obviously like my little siblings live with them, and they'll be doing something they're not supposed to do, and my parents will be like, hey, cut that out, stop like fighting with your sister or whatever. And my immediate response is like, my parents have never been violent, they've never hit us, never anything. It's always been just great, but of course sometimes you just need to raise your voice and be like, can you like stop throwing your broccoli at your brother's head? But because I've had such a long childhood experience of trauma with raising voices, my first instinct is like grab the kids and like, let's just go to a room and hide. But I know that, there's no threat, there's no anything. So it's kind of like an immediately, like I kind of like jump a little bit and I'll like panic and then I'll be fine. But it's that first immediate reaction, like grab the kids and hide. But, logically I know my parents have never been violent. They will never be violent. They don't even spank them. Right. They hardly ever raise their voice. So I think for me, that's just one that I constantly have to work to just kind of get past and remember, like, I am safe. I am like, this is a great environment. Nothing's going to happen. It's just that immediate like instinct, like knee-jerk reaction, basically.
Right. And thanks for sharing that. I know that it's definitely difficult, and like, how long does it take you to get out of that trigger or to get over it?
When I was a teenager, it was a lot harder. I think it was, even if like, if I come home from school and I'm being loud and my parents are like, hey, like Sabrina, keep it down, we're trying to do something, I think that they're mad, and I would go and cry and I'd run away, and they'd be like, we just wanted to like have you be quiet. Now that I'm older, I'm like, it's like there and it's gone before I can even register that it happened.
Wow, that's
so
amazing.
It's a lot better now. Yeah.
Avra, do you feel comfortable sharing any examples of your triggers and how they impact you?
Yeah, I would say honestly, I used to be addicted to marijuana, so
Right.
I would say if I see anyone with like a wax cart or even offering me anything, my stomach drops, and I just have to like get out of that situation because it just brings back so many bad memories and so many toxic people I surrounded myself with.
Right.
And honestly, like, I would say it could take a couple days just to like feel better, right? Like, still trying to stay strong and just remember I need to stay strong and, you know,
power through it.
Power through it and just remind myself like everything bad that comes with smoking.
Right. Well, you know, with all that being said, like, you know, talking about triggers can be a trigger, you know, and this conversation could bring up potential triggers. So why don't we talk about positive triggers? Like, is there anything positive, like, that really, like, triggers you to be like, oh my goodness, like for me, it's Disneyland. Like, every time I think about Disneyland, I'm like, or if I like watch a Disney movie, or if I see like any type of like even like a Starbucks drink, like if I'm having a pink drink, I'm like, okay, I remember when I was at Disneyland, like, wow, I'm gonna go watch Disney movies all day. Do you guys have anything positive that like brings back like just such a positive emotion?
Yeah, so what I find is some positive triggers for me is songs about love. So I am really big. I love like really happy, upbeat songs, and and they don't even necessarily have to be about love. They can just be happy, upbeat songs, and it gives me the feeling that I'm falling in love. And I think for me, that's a big thing, is I just surround myself with happy, positive music, and just the feeling, I could literally be in the worst mood ever, and I'll hear one of these songs, and it just gives me so much serotonin. I just, in that moment, I feel like I'm falling in love with like just life. Nobody in particular, just like life itself. And I think for me, those are the best triggers, is just, you know, I could be walking down the street or driving, and somebody has their window rolled down and they're listening to a happy song, and I'm happy in that moment.
Is there any particular artist or song that makes you feel extra happy and like excited, and like your stomach doesn't drop, but like it rises and you're like, and it takes your breath away?
Yeah, so I'm a huge Harry Styles stan. I would die for that man. I always joke and say he's God's favorite child. He's just, anytime Harry Styles is on, there's no reason for me to be sad. I think he's my number one idol. Don't tell anybody. Just kidding.
So making
I love you, Harry.
So yeah, if he hears this, right? No, but basically, I guess what my biggest question is that just kind of popped into my head is, do you ever use your positive triggers whenever you are experiencing a negative trigger? Do they ever pull you out or remind you and bring you back to earth?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the great thing about today's just world is, you know, we have these handy dandy little devices that we keep in our pockets, and anything bad does happen, I can just slip into a corner and boom, I have a radio in my hand, and I can just pull up Spotify and listen to music immediately. It's instant release. It's instant soothing, you know?
Yeah. Avra, can you give me an example of one of your triggers or one of your positive triggers?
Yeah, I would also go off of Sabrina's thing that we have a handy dandy cell phone.
Yeah.
And I really like a lot of TV shows, so if I see someone wearing like a Rick and Morty t-shirt out in public, I'll definitely get happy. And, you know, you just are like, yeah, like total stand for them.
Have you guys ever considered the fact that like you can have a positive trigger? Because I didn't until this interview. Actually, Avra, before the interview when you were talking about positive triggers, have you guys ever considered that before?
Yeah, I would definitely say so, especially at work now. I work at a restaurant, and people can bring dogs in, and will totally make my day. It's a totally happy trigger. Just be like, oh my god, doggy. Like,
Let me hug you.
Yeah, for real.
Oh my goodness. Well, do you guys have any last comments to say or anything just about triggers? Anything that like you might want me to know so I can understand triggers a little bit more?
I would just say that it can happen unexpectedly, and if someone is going through a trigger, it could be traumatic for them, and just to stay by them and remind them like we're in the present moment, right?
Right.
Like, it's not happening. Like, you're okay. We're gonna move forward.
I love that, Avra. Thank you guys so much for coming and, doing this interview. I know that this is a really difficult topic, and I just thank you for your guys' just strength during this conversation.
Yeah, of
Yeah, I
course.
love being here. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, have a great day, guys.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks.